What is going on, guys? And welcome to another edition, my God, the 16th edition of the Roto Underworld Stackfest here on RotoGrinders, brought to you by Player Profiler. I am, as pretty much always, your host, Erik Beimfohr, and we have a special guest this week. A lot to live up to here. Maybe not always living up to, the touting the best plays, but touting some of the grossest plays. Chase Vernon is stepping in for Matt Kelly this week. Obviously, holiday weekend, so Matt is not here. And of course, as always, Dario Offstein is with us today. We'll start with Chase. Chase is the new guy. It's a holiday weekend. How are you feeling? It's week 16. The season's almost over. There's weather everywhere. How are we feeling heading into kind of a bizarre slate tomorrow?
Dude, it's a time for presents, man. I'm ready to unwrap this weekend, man. I'm ready to go to town. I am ready to open up this DFS slate and kill it. I'm just stoked. I'm stoked to be on with you guys. I'm stoked to be doing the show. It's going to be a fun one, man. I actually love these types of slates where they're just super, super gross, because that's when you can find the values that nobody else wants to touch. I mean, back a few weeks ago, before Chris Moore was actually, chalk, right? Like that's the guy that I was targeted a couple weeks ago. I mean, it's the gross plays that I love attacking. You hit it right on the head for the introduction, so I appreciate that.
I totally agree. And Dario, the last time that Matt missed, I feel like we really hit a lot of stuff on that slate. So Chase, don't let us down today. Don't drag Dario and I down. Maybe Matt's been dragging us down, so don't step into his role. You need to elevate us. Don't bring us down.
Last week, Dario, we were sitting there talking, right? And we were talking about Isaiah Pacheco, and I was like, dude, Jerick McKinnon is the play this week. Like, you got to get Jerick McKinnon in your lineups. We were talking about it on our show at 6 p.m. Eastern time, which you're going to see us, or myself and Jacob Sanderson on there, if you guys want to tune in for some more DFS content over there on Roto Underworld. So, yeah, I'm excited for this week once again, and hopefully I can nail it on the head for these gross plays that nobody else wants to touch.
I do think, Dario, that Chase is 100% spot on. And honestly, I couldn't agree more in terms of when we get the gross slates. Those are the ones I like. And I do think there's something to be said for kind of this show is a little bit where we thrive in the chaos and the the grossness of slates. And we certainly have that today. Before the show, we were talking through. If you have not watched the show before, we don't really totally go game by game. We don't totally go position by position. We're obviously going to break down 4 to 5 of the games today, but we kind of are focused on these game stacks, right? Where are the best environments to really load up, say, on one game? And that's where these gross guys can really come into play. And I think it's especially true tomorrow, where, we have gross games versus good games every week, even in September. But when the weather starts getting like this, I can't walk outside my house right now without like almost getting knocked down by the wind and freezing my face off. So imagine 2 teams are going out and playing football in that, and then 2 other teams are in a dome, right? I think that this show is like a really important one for a slate like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like for example, we were talking about whether to even consider the Bills-Bears game this week, because the weather forecast right now for Chicago is saying a lot of wind, probably a little bit of snow. And we know Josh Allen has a cannon of an arm, but this just feels like maybe 15 pass attempts combined between the 2 teams to me, especially they're playing the Bears, who barely throw the ball at all as is.
Yeah, that game, I think we will briefly touch on that one maybe close to the end, but that's got to be like the epitome of this slate, where the grossness of the weather in certain spots. You can see my dog is tired as well in the background from all the cold weather. But normally we would be like, oh my God, dude, how many Josh Allen stacks are we running? We did this with the Bears last week. Do we need bringbacks, right? Do we need bringbacks to our Jalen Hurts stacks? We'd be talking a lot about that game. And instead it's like maybe the 5th best game, 6th best game on the slate or something like that. So I think that makes this slate very, peculiar. The one game that I think probably all of us agree probably stands out above all of them, at least to me, is Chiefs and Seahawks. So we'll start with that one. Might take the most amount of time. Chiefs games always take a lot of time, because it's like, of course, Mahomes, of course, Kelsey. Now what? That's and it has been, as Chase mentioned, 2 weeks in a row. Jerick McKinnon, the RB1 overall on the week, 2 straight weeks. Can't believe that's a real thing in 2022, almost 2023, but it is. And we haven't got an official word right on Hardman yet. The wide receiver stuff is still really in flux. Obviously, Kelsey is Kelsey. Great matchup for Kelsey. But Dario, how are you kind of viewing the Chiefs in this game? Because I think now with the emergence of McKinnon in this, where he's a little bit of the leader, but still kind of a split in the backfield, wide receiver rotations, Tony's back. How are we kind of attacking the Chiefs when they're probably almost assuredly the team that scores the most points on this slate?
Mm-hmm. For what it's worth, I think that the news on Mecole Hardman has kind of, I saw a report that he was trending toward not playing tomorrow. Yeah. I know they were talking about week 16 being his return for a little while. And then it sounded like maybe it was yesterday, late in the afternoon or this morning, that Andy Reid was saying that it's not looking quite as likely. So I think I was thinking a little bit that Mecole Hardman might actually take from Jerick McKinnon more than anyone else, because he gets a lot of those sort of schemed touches near the line of scrimmage. But it looks like we are not going to have him to worry about this week. I still think that, Juju Smith-Schuster had a very good game last week. He just didn't find the end zone, and so that's why people weren't really talking about it. But he had like 10 targets, 88 yards, very solid stat line, and I think he could very easily have a big game. One kind of underrated narrative could be him, and I guess I take it back. He wasn't at USC same time as Pete Carroll, but that would be funny. Scratch that.
I love some good narratives. I love some good narrative streets. We've been hitting on way too many narrative streets in just like puns. We've been coming up with our plays based on how many passes you've what was it? Pacheco caught one more pass every single week for a month or something like that, and then narrative streets and stuff. So maybe we can dig in a little bit deeper than that. And Chase, maybe you can hit on something. Is there anything that you've noticed on the Chiefs side? I know you talked about McKinnon last week. We kind of know what it is with Kelce, although he's tough to fit. He doesn't project for a lot of ownership right now because he's not particularly easy to fit. Is there a way that you feel like we can use the Chiefs guys to fit Kelce, or do you have a preference on any of these other Chiefs guys, Juju, MVS, etc.?
Yeah, so if you guys listen to the Big Tilt, right, like you'll hear me, like Jacob loves his offensive stats. He loves, talking about the targets earned, the volume that certain receivers are getting, the routes run. For me, I like looking at the defenses and trying to find like where you could attack, right? Because that's what offensive coordinators look at. They don't come out and they don't say, hey, like we have to run our offense no matter what. Well, some do. I'm not going to say all
unless you're Cliff. Unless you're Cliff Kingsbury, yeah.
Yeah, but a lot of the better coordinators, especially with the Chiefs, right? They look to attack certain weaknesses on the field. They take advantage of certain situations. And it's kind of funny because when you look at the Seahawks, they've played one good slot receiver the entire season. Like, I don't think I've ever seen this before where we're at week 16 and they've only played one good slot receiver. Like, when you look at the actual schedule itself, you see the Lions on there, but Amon-Ra St. Brown was hurt. Outside of that, they played Chris Godwin, who ended up going like 6 for 8, I think. 71 yards and a touchdown against him. So he got you almost 20 points. That's phenomenal. Outside of that, Rondale Moore is the second best slot receiver they've faced pretty much all season, I'm pretty sure. And he ended up going in one of their games. He ended up putting up double-digit points. It was like 8 for 69 yards. So if we can sit and look at the Chiefs and how they attack, typically when there's a team with a slightly less or a slightly more advantageous matchup in the slot, Juju Smith-Schuster will typically play a few more slots in there. Typically, he sits around 40%. When we see that there's a weakness there, Andy Reid moves him in the slot, and we see right around 50% or so. So I really like Juju Smith-Schuster. We've seen the targets. We've seen the volume over the past, 6-7 weeks now. He's a lock for me this week. I'm going to be having him in a lot of lineups, and I think that you can stack him easily with Patrick Mahomes. But that's chalk, right? Like that's something that we already know will likely happen. Juju Smith-Schuster will probably see right around 15% ownership, 18% ownership, somewhere in that range. So for me personally, Travis Kelce for me is also locked. Like it's very hard to get away from what I believe to be the chalk in this game in terms of the Chiefs side. Like I don't want to run out, like an MVS or like just try and take these dart throws with some of the other guys. I think that the way that you get different this week is actually not playing Jerick McKinnon and trying it out with Isaiah Pacheco. Since we saw the Seahawks, they were great up against the running back. And then up at like week 10, something happened. I didn't have time to actually go in and figure out what exactly it was yet, but after week 10, they've been absolutely abysmal up against running backs in the middle. Like running backs have literally been running all over them. And they're still somewhat porous. They were very porous up against running backs in the receiving game, which is something that I love to study. And they still haven't been great, but teams have been able to run on them so they don't have to worry about the backs actually catching passes because they're getting 6 yards, a carry on first down, and they're setting it up for success in the passing game. So for me, like Isaiah Pacheco, he's not getting talked about. He still had 86 yards last week rushing, and he has been seeing targets, although Jerick McKinnon is still my guy. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm still going to be playing a lot of Jerick McKinnon this week. I love Jerick McKinnon. He's one of my favorite players in the NFL for 2022. But I think I might take some shots on Isaiah Pacheco to try and get a little bit different. It just depends on exactly how I want to approach it. Maybe I'll just fade Patrick Mahomes and think that they get up and they just end up running the ball, and the Seahawks can't keep up because the Seahawks haven't been great as of late.
Yeah, couple quick things, and then I'll kick it to Dario. I hadn't noticed what you mentioned about the Seattle run defense, and I'm just looking at it right now. So they had a Week 11 bye, right? There's maybe a smidge of matchup related stuff in here, but I mean, they face Saquon, they face the Lions who can run on people. The Falcons just doesn't matter who's running the ball. Apparently, they just run on people, right? And they weren't an awesome run defense, but it was like maybe let's call it average to below average. Then we get the Raiders out of the bye. Everybody remembers what Josh Jacobs did, right? 283 rushing yards to the Raiders, 171 to the frickin' Rams, right? The John Wolford, Bryce Perkins Rams offense, 223 to the Panthers. Foreman, Chuba Hubbard just ripping them up, and then 170 last week to CMC, basically just CMC. So, a couple tougher matchups, but still, this is also a tough matchup. The Chiefs are a tough matchup. And so I think that's pretty interesting, what you mentioned about the Chiefs. I won't hammer anything more about Juju because he's also probably my favorite guy in this game, maybe even totally across the board when you account for ownership and matchup and price and everything. But Dario, how are you? I know you talked a little bit about it, but what about if you also want to, dovetail into the Seahawks side and hit on anything we missed on the Chiefs?
Yeah, I think it's definitely like you guys are both on to Juju. I think that I like him a lot too. And then I think Chase is right that you should be still playing Isaiah Pacheco. Like last week, I was still on Isaiah Pacheco, even though it turned out to be another big McKinnon week. And I think they're both very much in play. Like they're both getting pretty solid usage. I think one thing that's interesting is Jerick McKinnon's snap share has continually gone up week over week. And we'll probably see it end up somewhere in that 50 to 60% range again. But I think that's kind of has a lot of signal to me. He played most, if not all, of the second half last week, and the Chiefs were kind of on the ropes. So I think that it's a kind of a matter of, remember in the playoffs last season, they clearly trust Jerick McKinnon, and I think that's still the case. They trust him more than Pacheco. So it could be kind of a game script thing where if it gets out of hand and they're like, okay, we just got to run out the clock, then it's Pacheco. But if it's anything interesting, then it's more McKinnon. But yeah, I think, like you said, good time to talk about the Seahawks. Obviously they're missing Tyler Lockett this week, and Kenneth Walker is still pretty banged up from his ankle injury. I think that DK Metcalf is obviously going to be very chalky. He's probably going to see, most, if not all of the targets to the wide receivers. And then Marquise Goodwin should be the one stepping up to take Tyler Lockett's place. But then you also have the factor of Marquise Goodwin is recovering from his own injury. He was questionable most of the week. So it's kind of a tricky situation. Lots to be nervous about with the Seahawks, I think.
I will say it would not be this show if I didn't get excited for Marquise Goodwin this week. I think I'm contractually obligated to be excited for someone like Marquise Goodwin. We can't talk about Equinemius St. Brown and Khalif Raymond and Josh Reynolds and all these scrubs all year long, and then an Olympic sprinter gets dropped into our laps against the Chiefs for 4,300. And I don't get excited about it. But obviously nothing negative to say about DK Metcalf. I do think Walker is interesting, assuming he plays. I agree. I'm, a little concerned about his injury, but the Chiefs can get punished on the ground, and Ken Walker can punish people on the ground. If we would have said a month ago, 6,400 Ken Walker in the one game we're actually excited about on this whole slate is not super popular, you'd be like, what? What do you mean? We were playing him in cash, 2 months ago. So I think he's pretty interesting. Obviously, Goodwin. But anything else, Chase, on the Seahawks? What are we missing?
Yeah, I think there are a few things to point out, and I think there's a way to actually attack this game, because how many lineups are we going to see where it's going to be Patrick Mahomes, Juice Smith-Schuster, Travis Kelce, they're going to run it back with Goodwin because they need to save salary, right? Like that's going to be a massive play on the slate. Or we see Patrick Mahomes, Jerick McKinnon, Travis Kelce, Marquise Goodwin. Like I feel like that's going to be pretty much every single lineup that starts out with a triple stack is going to run it back with Marquise Goodwin, because you can't play DK Metcalf with that lineup. It gets way too expensive, right? So That's a way to save salary. That's why I'm actually going to attack this game slightly different. For me, I actually want to run it with Geno Smith up against the Chiefs defense, which we know is poor to an extent. I want to play Kenneth Walker this week because we've seen Kenneth Walker start to get used in the receiving game in 3 of the past 4. And the one that he didn't get used in, it's like he was hurt. Like he ended up getting hurt early on the game. I know that he's dealing with back spasms. I know that he's dealing with an ankle injury. I know that he's having a little bit of a tough time. But this is a guy that only needs 10 runs to be able to get you the efficiency, to be able to have a breakaway run for a touchdown, to be able to have a breakaway reception, right? So even if he gets 15 touches, I know he's still slightly expensive, but I would like to play the Geno Smith with Kenneth Walker, Marquise Goodwin, right? And then run it back with either Travis Kelce, Juice Smith-Schuster, and Isaiah Pacheco, and try to leverage as much as I can off of what the chalk will be. This is just something, this is a matchup or a stack that, like, instead of like fading this game, because a lot of times I like to fade these games and just hope for the under, I'm just going to leverage and try to go to the complete opposite end and play some Geno Smith and some Isaiah Pacheco, which I don't think we'll see as high of ownership.
Yeah, I really like, we talk about Chiefs games a lot, and it's very hit or miss. Last week was like a so hit. Shout out to the MVS ceiling game with all of 11 points. Thank God he caught that touchdown. But people cannot get their head around like playing these Chiefs guys other than Travis Kelce. Maybe a little, right? Maybe now people will buy McKinnon, but people weren't playing Pacheco. People, even this week, I'm not sure that people, right? I have every flex play, every skill position player in this game sorted by projected ownership. Travis Kelce is down, right? Travis Kelce and Juju are down there, sub 10%, because nobody ever feels comfortable clicking Juju, right? Because it's just like, yeah, he had a good game last week, but 5,800 Juju, right? There's just guys who project better typically. And Travis Kelce is just a cost thing. Everybody wants to play Travis Kelce, but we'll get to some of these other running backs, mainly running backs, and maybe a little Justin Jefferson that are expensive. And so it's like, how do you fit an 8K tight end, right? I'll play a 3K tight end, save $5,000 and go get these other guys. So if we can find the Marquise Goodwins, the Isaiah Pachecos, the Jujus, those guys that can get savings and they correlate within our stacks, I think you can somehow get, like, every week we talk about this. It's like, what do you mean people aren't stacking the Chiefs? It's like, well, nobody feels comfortable clicking Juju, MVS. Now it's like Tony, Justin Watson. We try to talk ourselves into Sky Moore. That's not a thing. It's like there's really nothing to do on the Chiefs side for most people, and so that's why I really like them. I'll also add, I like the Geno side of things as well. That's kind of how you can get that savings, right? Geno double stacks just look amazing to me, and they don't project as highly owned as I would have thought that they would. DK will be popular for sure, but like, I just feel like this game is just a smash given the ownership I'm seeing right now. Am I missing something, Dario?
No, yeah, I think we've seen much chalkier games on individual slates that are not nearly as clear of a smash as this game is on this slate. Like, Chase was just saying he's not going to fade this game, and in my head I was thinking to myself, like, you can't fade this game. Like, this game is half this slate. And yeah, like, when you think about it in that context, the fact that no one in this game is projected above 20%, no Chiefs pass catchers, like, I mean, I would imagine that Travis Kelce or Juju ends up breaking 10%, but at the moment they're not projected to do so. So
right. and even then it doesn't run away from you, right? No. Like your example, both of your examples, when Chase saying like, oh, I'll fade these games, or Dario saying like, oh, we can't fade this game. I think back to that Vikings-Lions game. Was that 2 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago, I think it was, where the whole slate was absolute trash. Literal trash.
Yeah.
Every single we talked a lot, and shout out DJ Chark. He went ham finally in that game. But we were talking a lot about, okay, everybody's going to play Amon-Ra, Swift, Jefferson, whatever. How do we get different from within this game? That worked with Chark, but everybody played everybody. Like, Chark got like over 20, like, depending upon the contest you were in, it was like everybody got owned, man. Every single player in the whole game picked up a ton of ownership. That's not what happens in this game. Right. This game, you'll get a little bit of steam, of course. DK Metcalf, Travis Kelce, people want to play those guys, but I just don't think it's going to get out of hand personally, which is like, that's what I love. I want to jam all in on the best game if it's not going to get out of hand. I'm willing to eat, that 2 target 1 catch MVS game, but like I'm willing to spin that roulette wheel on some of these other guys. Any last Noah Fant, any last other things? Or I guess we should say we did just get the Seahawks elevated Wayne Gallman and Godwin Egwebuke to their active roster, which feels a little not great for Ken Walker. So I guess we should talk about that really quickly. If Walker does not play, and then anything about like a Noah Fant or anybody, or a third wide receiver, Laquan Treadwell, like, is there anything else?
Can I just say that I hate Pete Carroll with a passion? Like, I hate him. He just came out and said, hey, he's looking good. He's doing the walkthrough. He's going to be part of our game plan this week. I hate him so much with like a passion. Every ounce of my body hates Pete Carroll when it comes to figuring out DFS freaking lineups, because we're seeing Kenneth Walker, right? He's coming out and he's running 20 plus routes per game. Right. And the guy who's kind of the release valve for this offense, because they send their tight ends downfield, right, is Tyler Lockett. Well, Tyler Lockett's not there. So Kenneth Walker could be that guy if he sees the touches. I really want to play, Kenneth Walker like really bad. I just hope that he actually plays. It's terrible.
Yeah, I think that on the Noah Fant note, he was questionable too. He didn't practice. The Saturday games really mess with everything, because instead of Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, injury reports, we're getting Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but he didn't practice Tuesday, Wednesday, limited Thursday, which is not great, but they're saying he's trending toward playing. And then I think that if he had gone on to miss this game, I would definitely be interested in some Will Dissly. I think that maybe Noah Fant can still get there for you anyway. I'm trying to think. I can't remember if this knee injury for Fant is something new or if it's been lingering, but it looks like it was something new he picked up, because I don't see him on last week's injury report for the Seahawks. So that's kind of, I don't know. I feel pretty uneasy about Fant or Dissly given the uncertainty there. I think that you probably, like, if you're stacking Geno, you probably do want to roll the dice on them a little bit, just because I think the absence of Tyler Lockett is going to open up a lot of things, and someone could step up and take those targets. But I don't think you're playing more than just like a sprinkle of Fant or Dissly.
I think it's, to put a bow on it, for me, definitely Fant would be my last priority amongst, let's just assume now in this instance that Ken Walker plays. Metcalf, Goodwin, and Walker would definitely be the priorities for me from Seattle. Obviously, Geno. But I do think there's some interesting things you can do from a roster construction perspective, which we'll get into, again, some of these other guys we want to play in these other games, particularly this next game, where if Noah Fant can just do what he did last week, basically, right? 5 for 60 and a touchdown or whatever it was, something like that, and you get it for 3,400, even if Kelsey does his 25-point game or whatever, now you can get like your Geno double stack with Metcalf. You can easily get Juju. You want Justin Jefferson. You want Derrick Henry. You want Christian McCaffrey. You can get those guys when you kind of go that route. So I would be mixing some of those in. But again, the priority for me is kind of all the other guys. Let's pivot to this next game. No weather. Shout out to a freaking team who lives in a winter wonderland that has a dome. God bless them. These other freaking franchises are absolutely killing me outside. I mean, it's not the 1930s. We don't have to stick to those old traditions when we wore leather helmets to play. So Minnesota indoors against the Giants. Minnesota last week, for anyone that, somehow missed one of the craziest games I've ever watched in my entire life, came back from 33 points down at halftime to win. Cousins goes nuts. Jefferson goes nuts. Dalvin Cook goes nuts. Everybody but TJ Hawkinson. Pretty much KJ Osborne career game. And now they get the Giants. Pretty brutal defense on the Giants. And the Vikings have a defense that's very attackable. However, the Giants are it's like the Texans the last couple of weeks at wide receiver. I don't want to click any of these. We're really going to sit here and talk about Isaiah Hodgins and Richie James and, Darius Slayton in this offense. And so there's this thing I'm trying to have you guys figure out for me is at what point, with some ownership on these guys, do we really want to dive into some of the Giants? Or are we just kind of like, hey, Saquon season? How are you approaching Chase? How are you approaching this one?
Oh man, I think we have some news coming in that I got to
this
look
real?
up here in a second. I was just seeing that. That's crazy. I was just trying to look it up, but you hopped over to me on this one. Personally, like I want to play the running backs in this game big time. Like I want to play the Dalvin Cook. When we talk about the Giants, they've been pretty good on the outside this far in the season, but up against the running back as of late, they've allowed 110 yards rushing, they've allowed 177 yards rushing, 136 yards rushing, 152 yards rushing, 150 yards rushing, 96. I mean, it's like literally like they're getting to double or triple digits very easily for the running back position. Dalvin Cook is somebody that, although I think that he will see some sort of ownership, I think the majority of it is going to be on like Justin Jefferson, right? Just because he's been so dominant as of late and he's been utilized no matter what. Now that doesn't mean that I don't want to play Justin Jefferson, but at the same time, like I think I want to like try to leverage the actual game plan and hope that it's a slower pace of play type game, just to kind of fade the options in the receiving side. Meanwhile, I really do like Isaiah Hodgins. I liked him coming out of college. I thought that I liked him more than Gabriel Davis when the Bills ended up taking him around later because I thought that they had similar profiles, but Hodgins was a lot more dominant in the red zone. The Giants have seen this, right? The Giants have utilized him in the red zone and when they end up getting close. And he's come down, I believe, with 2 receiving touchdowns thus far in the season. He's had, I believe, over 40 yards or 35 yards, I think, in the past 3 contests with at least 4 receptions. It's not great numbers, but when we talk about his pricing at 4K or maybe 4,100, I think that we're going to see this guy really start to excel as they continue to utilize him more and more in their offense. I mean, he hasn't let him down. He's pretty much caught, I believe, almost every ball that's been catchable or came his way thus far in the season.
Yeah, he's the antithesis of the guy he replaced, Kenny Galladay.
Yeah.
Kenny Galladay drops everything, is, maybe not in shape, not trying as hard or whatever. And he's not the world's best player, but he's an NFL level player and he's working his ass off and he's doing his job. I do think he's the most interesting guy for me out of the Giants receiving core because, like you said, once you kind of prove out a skill, this is kind of like a macro level thing that I believe in. And I believe that his goal line-esque role is like something that has been proven out on this particular Giants team. If he was playing with Justin Jefferson and these other guys, maybe it would be different. But on this particular Giants team, he's kind of proven to be that guy down there. And at 4,100 on a slate where we're looking for that, right? We need one of those guys. So we talked about Marquise Goodwin a bunch because there's not a lot down there. And this is one of the games we want to attack. And it's a defense we want to attack with the Vikings pass defense just getting lit up frequently. So Dario, who, you can talk more about Isaiah Hodgins if we're just going to have an Isaiah Hodgins love fest. He seems to fit the mold of someone we would have a love fest about on this show, for being totally honest, subbing in for the Khalif Raymond Award. That's what we're going to call it. That's the weekly. Who is our weekly Khalif
Raymond Award?
Is Isaiah Hodgins. But we'll get into the Vikings, but I think the Giants are the most interesting part. What's your take on them?
Yeah, I think, taking a quick look at ownership and past usage, it's been kind of a weird situation where like Richie James fluctuated from being like their default wide receiver 1. Early in the season, he had a week or 2 where he was chalky. He kind of fell off the map completely. In these last couple of weeks, it's really just been that trio of, like you guys said, Richie James, Darius Slayton, and Isaiah Hodgins. I think looking at salary and ownership, I'm probably with you guys that Isaiah Hodgins looks like the play this week. I don't think that I would get behind the Darius Slayton, chalk. I think that 15% probably going to end up upwards of that for, he's been all right. Like we're talking about a 21% target share across the last 5 games, but you have to keep in mind the quality of those targets is not going to be very good. And he's kind of climbing up there in price now. I mean, 5,200 is still a lot more expensive than Hodgins or Richie James are right now. So I think I have a little bit of a hard time getting behind Slayton when you can pivot to Hodgins. And yeah, I think I'm basically in agreement with you guys here. And I just pulled this up, so I figured I might as well throw it out there. But in the last 5 games, they've given 4 red zone targets to Richie James and 3 to Isaiah Hodgins, while Darius Slayton has had none. So for whatever reason, it does seem like they do trust those other 2 guys a little bit more in the red zone. Could just be, I mean, obviously it's a little fluky, but for what it's worth.
He's
Okay,
seeing a
now
17% target share in the red zone right now. Like, or that's like his rate is sitting at 17% when Isaiah Hodgins is running routes. Like, I mean, it's kind of crazy how this guy went from literally practice squad to being a major threat in the red zone.
I think that this game might even be more interesting for roster construction because of a lot of what you said. I mean, basically any of these Giants pass catchers, you can talk yourself into it, right? We could even talk about Daniel Bellinger, who is like, look, is he, some superstar? No, but he's a pretty decent athlete, and he's playing and he's running routes, right? Again, in a good matchup in a dome for 3,300. What, like, we can't ask for much more than that at the tight end position. I've played worse than that at the tight end position, this year. All these Giants are really appealing, but what I hate doing, it's not that I don't want to play those guys because of some of the things that they do, but just being like, that guy's cheap and he has opportunity. That's what becomes we talked about Chris Moore last week, right? Mm-hmm. We talked about Philip Dorsett. We spent a lot of time talking about Texans guys, and it's like, well, they have all the opportunity, but this offense isn't going to throw that much. They're not going to throw downfield a lot either. It's kind of a mess. So there's one dude who I do feel good about playing based on who he is as an actual NFL football player, and that's Saquon Barkley. And Saquon looks to me kind of like maybe even my favorite play in this whole game. I love Justin Jefferson. I love Dalvin Cook, blah, blah, blah. But Saquon projects almost as well as those other top backs, which we will definitely talk about, King Henry and such. But he's just getting a little bit less ownership because it's like, look, if I'm going to pick an 8K running back, I'm going to pick Derrick Henry or CMC. Saquon just falls behind, and he hasn't had that 35-point game or whatever, at least not in a while. But it's in his bag. He's still got it. They're playing for the playoffs, dude. Saquon ain't leaving the field unless he needs a sip of water. So, like, he is a little under-owned to me on the Giants side. Chase, what do you think about Saquon?
I mean, Saquon for me is an absolute lock. I don't really know how, like, if you're going to play this game, I don't know how you don't get Saquon Barkley in there. Minnesota's been meh up against, running backs thus far in the season. They just allowed Deion Jackson and Zach Moss combined to put up 136 yards. They've been, I'm not going to say they've been terrible, right? Because they've actually been okay. But when they end up facing good running backs, typically they end up giving away points like their candy, essentially. It's the season of giving. We're going to see them do it again this week with Saquon Barkley. Now, he's not going to be a lock, right, for me. Like, I'm not going to play him. It's just if I'm playing this game, I feel like I have to get him into my lineups to some extent. It's just figuring out the combination of players that I want to try and go at this, because I like Dalvin Cook a lot. He's probably one of my favorite plays. Probably my favorite play in this game is Dalvin Cook. Do I want to play two running backs in the same game? That scares me a little bit because of the pace of play. Meanwhile, we have, one touchdown could end up getting vulture. We just talked about Isaiah Hodgins, who's getting targets in the red zone. Daniel Bellinger is getting targets in the red zone. He didn't see one last week, but he's seeing almost one per game or so when he's healthy. And we just saw Dawson Knox do work up against these guys, and Dawson Knox was close to getting a touchdown, and he would have been a slate breaker. So, do I want to take a chance? Do I think it's going to be a high-scoring game? If so, then I have to fade Dalvin Cook, right? And then I have to go with Justin Jefferson and get somebody receiving, because unless we're going to see breakaway run after breakaway run, it could end up just being a messy overall game and a dump. So it just doesn't fit the correlation that I want to play in my lineup. So I do like him this week. I'm not saying I don't. I think he's a good play, but the way that I want to attack this game doesn't involve him as much. I'd much rather play like Dalvin Cook and then try to get Daniel Bellinger and Isaiah Hodgins and hope that Daniel Jones throws for a couple touchdowns as cheap options. And then I can go to a completely different game and work on stacks from a different game. So this is kind of my area. This is my game that I want to try to use the cheaper gross options and try to find, price breaks to be able to play some of the more expensive stacks.
Yeah, this team does feel pretty skinny stacky. I mean, you're not exactly dying to play Kirk Cousins. You're definitely not touching Daniel Jones. I mean, that would be the most galaxy brain thing to do on this slate, probably, is double stack Daniel Jones with Richie James and
I was gonna bring
Isaiah Hodgins or something.
Yeah, that's how you know it's really galaxy brained out. As I was when we were gonna close out up. To be fair, if you want to get all these up, you want Dalvin, you want CMC, you want these other guys, it is a crazy cheap thing to do, and they do all project well too. Now, you're not getting an ownership discount on them either, so it's I still prefer the Geno stacks to Daniel. I mean, shocker, a DK Metcalf and an Olympic sprinter stack is a little bit better than Richie James and Isaiah Hodgins, but I think if I were running 150, it's not something I would X out, basically, is what I'm saying.
And then I think interesting, we haven't really talked about the Vikings secondary pass catchers, right? Between KJ Osborne, Adam Thielen, and TJ Hawkinson. We've seen that TJ Hawkinson has gotten a ton of opportunity lately, but he hasn't been particularly efficient with it. Like he's kind of proving yet again that he's not great at turning expected fantasy points into real life actual fantasy points. And then I'm looking at
Except
the
when I fade
ownership
him when
and
he's 40% owned. Except when I fade him when he's 40% owned. That's when, oh, look, you remembered how to play football. It's the Mackey Award winner on that day, just that day only. Then I play him and it's 6 catches for 30 yards. Yeah. Anyway, I'm not tilted about it still or anything.
Yeah. Of course not. And then I think that it's interesting that KJ Osborne is lower owned than Adam Thielen, despite being cheaper. I mean, are people forgetting that we just saw him get like, was it 11 targets for 8 and 150? Like, I think that it was 16 targets.
16, Jesus.
Yeah.
So I think that, I mean, roll the dice on KJ Osborne before you roll him on Adam Thielen, in my opinion. He's cheaper and lower owned.
Osborne feels like the Evan Ingram type situation where he had the career game. No one is expecting him to have another game like that, but everybody just like writes it off completely, right? And so I want to live in that spot where you just said, like, I don't want to say, oh, that was a fluke. I'm not even going to worry about KJ Osborne, because that's what everybody's saying. And it's like, what if he's just like the wide receiver 2 on the Vikings in one of the best games we want to target? Like, that seems like a reasonable guy to have in some lineups. He's not a lot, right? He's not some lock or whatever. But like Evan Ingram last week, projected fine, was in maybe our favorite game, cheap tight end. It's like we should play a little bit of that dude. But the bias of like he can't score 35 fantasy points again, that was crazy. Like, keeps people from even playing him at all when it makes sense. Anything else on the Vikings? We really haven't talked about Justin Jefferson, a little bit of Dalvin Cook. How much Justin Jefferson, right? How else do we approach the Vikings?
I mean, honestly, like, you got to look at the slot snaps, and KJ Osborne played 37 snaps out of the slot last week. Week before that, he was sitting at, let me see, 21, 15, 14. Like, he's getting snaps in the slot. I know they like to work Justin Jefferson into the slot. I know they like to work Adam Thielen in the slot, but KJ Osborne is that slot guy, and that is where the Giants sacrifice the most yards, right? They end up getting beat in the slot and underneath routes. We saw it with Jahan Dotson a little bit. He got mixed in. Terry McLaurin's done it out of the slot. We saw CeeDee Lamb do it out of the slot a little bit. Like, these are guys that don't really play out of the slot entirely. They move around a lot. So somebody like KJ Osborne, who gets moved in and out of the slot and their defense doesn't really adjust to it because of, how they're going about it, like, that could actually be a recipe for success for KJ Osborne. I can't expect the 35 points again, but you can expect, like, I don't know, you could probably get you to 15 to 20. I would think pretty easily. Like, I would probably have him in if I had the projections up, which I don't right now. I think I have him around like 12 projected fantasy points. I could see him getting you to 15 or 20. And honestly, like, it's not even that gross. Like, it's a pretty easy route to success. It just depends on how much they run the ball versus passing. And if the Minnesota Vikings end up getting up in this game, he's just not going to see the targets necessary. So it really depends. Like, if you play the Saquon Barkley side of this, because you think that the Giants are going to be up, Saquon Barkley busts a big one. Like, he's a great guy to go back to and to run it back, to have that option if you don't want to play Justin Jefferson, which I don't know why you would ever not want to, but like, I get that. Like, if there's a game script involved where Saquon Barkley is going to be successful because of the running game, which is possible, then I would run it back with KJ Osborne, take some shots. I would run it back with Justin Jefferson too. Even Kirk Cousins, if you want to go that stack. But once again, like, this is a game that I'd much rather skinny stack and find my values on. KJ Osborne could be one of those guys, but I would want to play more players if I'm playing KJ Osborne than just, trying to fade it.
Yeah, I think that Osborne fits in the theme of this show. When you're correlating from within a game, as we like KJ Osborne in some neutral game script or their front running is probably not the guy you want in tournaments. But we've seen multiple times over the course of his career. It's very rare. It's like the Gabe Davis big game. Once every 6 months, big game, and then I chase it, for months and lose all my money.
He's like
KJ.
Sorry. I thought you were go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, he's like literally, he's the exact opposite of Isaiah Hodgins. I want to play him in every cash game, I think. Like KJ Osborne makes so much sense in cash because he's going to see a decent amount of targets. He's going to be working in an area of the field that the Giants struggle in. It's going to be an area that he's going to see probably 7 targets or so, have 5 receptions for 80 yards, and he's going to get you there in cash. Like he's going to do enough to keep you from losing.
Yeah, I just think that he makes for an interesting piece. He's kind of like the epitome from within this game, where it's like, I don't know, we talked about like 10 different guys here, and I think that this game is again the perfect for. I do think you can play some Daniel Jones. I think you can play some Kirk Cousins if you want to. A little bit tougher slate, even though there's bad weather, to play those quarterbacks. But I think that, you know, if you want to have a little wider quarterback pool, that's okay. But generally, I think these guys are like the core puzzle pieces to the slate. Almost everyone in this game. You need cheap guys to fill in. We got cheap Giants receivers. We got cheap Vikings receivers. You need tight ends. We got a little cheaper one in Bellinger. We got a little bit more expensive one that's theoretically better and higher upside, I guess, in TJ Hawkinson. You got 2 really good running backs, right? We got the best wide receiver in the NFL. We got some mid-tier wide receivers. You know, there's just however you want to fill the gaps in your lineups. I think probably between only 2 or 3 other games, right? We stack our Geno teams or our Mahomes teams. You need that cheap wide receiver. Maybe you don't need to play MVS, right? You don't have to have the Chief as the cheap guy. You can play the Giant or the Viking or whatever. That's kind of how I feel about this game. Anything we missed before we move on to maybe the biggest game of the week from a real life perspective?
I think we pretty much got it covered. I think, you know, final disclaimer on KJ Osborne is he did still run less routes than Thielen last week. And I think that he's probably still going to see less snaps. And so I think like Chase hit the nail on the head where it's going to be very game script dependent, where the Vikings just ran 11 personnel all game long because they were down 33-0 last week. And that it depends on how things play out, but I think you want to expose yourself to that possibility, and that's why I think he's a good play, especially at current ownership.
I love exposing myself. No, so I did see something.
Year.
Oh, I got a present for you. So I do see something about how the Bills were actually supposed to leave yesterday. They actually changed their travel plans. I didn't see any confirmation they left yesterday, but they were supposed to leave yesterday. So I think that was a little bit of fake news that we saw in the comments just to bring it up from earlier.
Good to know. And we will, of course, MJ, if you see something or if anybody sees something, by all means, bring it up and we'll discuss. But for now, we're going to move on to what probably could have been definitely would have been the biggest game of the week from a real life perspective. Still maybe is, but of course, anyone that's been living under a rock, we lost Jalen Hurts this week. Hopefully he's back next week, but Gardner Minshew will be starting, and for DFS purposes, that's sounds like, you know, at face value, you're like, oh my God, we're going to Gardner Minshew, but he's 4,800 on DraftKings, which creates this crazy ripple effect really for the whole slate. Is kind of what you do with the fact that we have a near min priced quarterback who has shown upside and kind of floor in the past on a superstar offense, right? How we handle Gardner Minshew, I think this is not, if you guys recall, the Sam Ehlinger week, where everybody was jamming 4K Sam Ehlinger into lineups. This is not that. This is a guy I feel much more, has a higher projection, and I feel much more confident in him, you know, coming in around that projection or even higher. So, Dario, how are you thinking about just like the general impacts of Gardner Minshew coming in? Are you worried? How big of a downgrade is it? Is it a downgrade? And then obviously him at 4,800 as super chalk. What are we thinking?
I mean, obviously he's a downgrade, right? Like, I think that's the easiest question to address. But like you said, he's not Sam Ehlinger. He's not, Jeff Driscoll. He's not Kyle Allen. Like, he's actually, I mean, he averaged 18 fantasy points per game across 9 games in 2020, 16 fantasy points per game across 14 games as a rookie when he was in a much, much, much worse offensive environment for the Jaguars. So I think he's actually, like you said, he's got a little bit of appeal in that sense. I think that, I mean, obviously he's chalky because he's like half the price of some of these other quarterbacks. So, I mean, I think that you're going to have to play him. The stacks and the lineups that you're going to be able to get around him and AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. And I think that Dallas Goedert should be back this week. It sounds like things are pointing in that direction. So, I mean, it is a tough matchup, obviously, but I think that because of the price and because of what he's going to let you do in lineups, you're just going to have to play him at
Chase,
least a little bit.
How are you approaching Minshew? And then how do you most, what's your biggest preference on any Minshew stacks? If you can say you don't like Minshew stacks, but if you do, we have 3 guys now basically, plus obviously Miles Sanders, which we'll talk about. That son of a bitch. The last game was miserable.
But, Dario knows that was my lock of the week last week on the big tilt, man.
Yeah.
That was my lock. That was my dude. That was my rock, my go-to, and he let me down. But that's actually where I'll start with. So Sirianni came out immediately after the game and said, "Hey, we screwed up. We didn't give him the ball enough. Yeah. He fumbled one time, but we should have kept feeding him the rock." He said it immediately.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah. Now you realize it. Jesus.
I'm so mad. Jonathan Taylor, we just talked about the game last week with the Colts and the Vikings, and I didn't say anything because I didn't want to talk about Jonathan Taylor and how he broke my heart in so many redraft and dynasty leagues. And then to make it even worse is I had a lot of Miles Sanders in the same leagues that I had freaking Jonathan Taylor in. So oh man, I can't, I'm going to have an aneurysm if I keep talking about it. So I'm trying to move forward. Moving forward, people, we're moving forward. Now, Miles Sanders, I think, should see the utilization. I think that we're going to see a ton of running. We're going to see them go back like last year. I don't know if you guys remember or not, but before Miles Sanders, in the game that Miles Sanders got hurt, they were throwing the ball for the previous 4 games before that, right? Just nonstop throwing the ball. Miles Sanders wasn't getting any work. And then all of a sudden, we see Miles Sanders come out and end up – my TV just turned off. We see Miles Sanders come out and absolutely destroy the Tampa Bay Buccaneers until by halftime or right around halftime or third quarter maybe. He ends up getting hurt. From that point on, from the Tampa Bay game on, we saw them utilize Miles Sanders a ton, and we've seen it this season, to an extent. We've seen him get up, over 140 yards, I think, in 2 straight games. He had a bad week last week. They got caught up in the moment and didn't run the ball enough. So I don't think that happens this week, and I think that's a great way to leverage off of Gardner Minshew is due to the fact that Miles Sanders isn't involved in the passing game. You can play Miles Sanders solo, and that might be the only way that you can go about playing the Eagles side of things. Now, this is where Gardner Minshew could actually work, right? Is if the Cowboys end up going up, they end up getting into a bunch of 3rd and long situations, having to throw. Dakota Prescott goes and throws a bunch of interceptions like he can tend to do from time to time, especially when the pressure's on in 3rd and long situations. And you start to see Gardner Minshew with short field position, right? And Gardner Minshew goes out and throws 4 touchdowns while throwing for 180 yards by using the weapons that he has. The other way that he could work out is getting the yards after the catch. So, of course, you want to get the A.J. Brown stack into this lineup. There are a few other guys that I think are interesting, but if you're playing Gardner Minshew, I don't know how he doesn't do it without A.J. Brown. You have to play A.J. Brown if you're playing Gardner Minshew. I think that Devonta Smith could still be an option, but I'm just saying, you're going to need yards after the catch. You're going to need, utilization from these receivers in terms of not just going downfield and trying to catch 15-yard passes, because that's not where Gardner Minshew thrives in. But I'm more so looking at this game as to hey, I want to play the Cowboy side of things in the receiving game.
Okay.
I understand that you have a very good secondary over there for the Eagles, but where they do end up struggling the most is out of the slot. They have a backup safety coming in. He's playing. So I like Dalton Schultz, right? I like playing some CeeDee Lamb in there, mixing that in. And I like playing Dak Prescott. I want to fade the running backs as a whole. I want to fade Tony Pollard, and I want to fade Ezekiel Elliott, because after they got run all over, right? The Eagles got run all over by the Commanders. They went out and they signed Linval Joseph, and they signed Ndamukong Suh. Right. And it took them a couple weeks to get adjusted because they signed him midweek. So they weren't ready for that game. And then the next game, they were still getting worked into the lineup. This allowed their defensive line to start to rotate, to get fresh bodies in there. The next 4 games, they shut down guys like, I think it was Saquon Barkley. I think they shut down Derrick Henry. 4 games where they didn't allow more than 60 rushing yards, I believe it was, to an opposing running back. They've been very, very, very good. And with the Cowboys, they're going to come in, they're going to try and run it off the bat, because that's what they do. When they get stubborn, they try to run it, and up until they're down and they're losing. And now you're going to see an opportunity for, of course, Miles Sanders, who we talked about, to get a ton of work in the rushing game, because the Eagles might be up at this point, a ton of interceptions. And then by the third quarter, we could see Dak Prescott just heaving the ball as often as he can. So I want to get some CeeDee Lamb. I want to get some Dalton Schultz, with Dalton Schultz seeing some work up against a backup safety, most likely, because that's how the Eagles like to run things. And I'm going to play this game, and I'm going to play it pretty heavily in terms of like the Cowboys passing game, and hope that I can fade off of the Pollard truthers out there and the big time Pollard fans.
Dario,
hope
what?
I didn't talk your ear off on that one.
Yeah, no, you're fine. Dario, what? I was just going to add the move from Hurts to Minshew. The first thing I thought this could mean absolutely nothing, but was kind of what Chase originally started to touch on with the AJ Brown versus Devonta Smith. It sounds crazy to say this because AJ Brown looks like, you know, the Derrick Henry of wide receivers, this freaking mutant, you know, Ultron looking dude out there at wide receiver, just a monster. And Devonta Smith is, you know, 160 pounds or whatever.
Skinny Batman.
Yeah, but he has been this insanely efficient, like go route type player. Devonta Smith is making contested catches. Jalen Hurts just throws hero balls. Now he does that to AJ Brown too, but AJ Brown is more of the. I mean, look what he did with the Titans, and he's done it with the Eagles as well this year, right? Get him get the ball in his hands, get him on the move, get the yak rolling, and that's where he cooks. It's not that Devonta can't run after catch. Of course he can. He's a Heisman Trophy winning wide receiver. He's pretty good at football, but he has actually been the guy that has most benefited from Hurts kind of doing a lot of hero ball. I mean, that's what got him in trouble last week. They just came. Miles Sanders didn't touch the ball till 6 minutes left in the second quarter because Hurts went back to pass and just threw nothing but bombs for a quarter and a half. They're all incomplete, so they never had the ball. And but that benefits Devonta's upside. Of course, it benefits everyone's. But I do feel like AJ Brown is a little bit more of a better fit with Minshew. I don't know what you think about that. And then I want to hear about your Cowboys thoughts as well.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you guys on the AJ Brown move. I also think that Dallas Goedert is intriguing for that same reason. Targets are going to be closer to the line of scrimmage. I'm surprised, Chase, that you're kind of fading Pollard. I think that in a game that they're going to have a tough time running the ball between the tackles, I do expect to see probably a little bit more creative Tony Pollard touches. Tony Pollard's target share has been really consistent. I mean, with how his price and his ownership are, he kind of just has to get at least one touchdown, if not two, to deliver for you. I think that's the biggest argument against him. But I think that everything else about Tony Pollard just screams like we got to play this guy.
So in terms of that, like I think that when you end up having a comparison in terms of like backfields, right? You have the Green Bay Packers who have AJ Dillon and Aaron Jones, right? Aaron Jones, typically they do use him in the middle. I'm not going to say like he's just on the outside or anything like that, but he's more of the creative back where you can actually use his speed to bounce around to the outside. And the Packers do like to use AJ Dillon on the outside as well. So I'm not trying to discount that. But if there's a comparison in the two backfields, I think that's a pretty somewhat accurate comparison in terms of usage wise. And they limited Aaron Jones to like 12 carries, I believe, for like 40 yards. So, I mean, it's just hard to get efficiency generated ever since they brought in these two interior tackles, because now they can use their bigger guys on the outside instead of focusing on having those guys who should be on the edges, blitz up the middle. It's just allowed a more healthy rotation, and it's created a lot of issues for these running backs. Actually, I have it up right here. We have the Packers up against the Eagles in week 12. Aaron Jones had 43 rushing yards. AJ Dillon had 64. He had one breakaway run on that one. Derrick Henry, 11 for 30 yards. We have Saquon Barkley, 9 for 28. And then David Montgomery got lucky last week with a couple touchdowns, but 12 for 53. I'm not saying that Tony Pollard can't be played. I just would rather opt for the receiving game on this one.
I think the hardest... Sorry, Dario, I was just going to say, I think the hardest part about Pollard for me is not even as much about Pollard. I like all the insight that Chase gave. It's kind of about the running backs in a lot of the games we're probably not even going to touch on too much in the slate, right? We talked about earlier, like, how do you get CMC, right? And I know he's more expensive, but Pollard's been so good, his price has kind of closed that gap between him and CMC, between him and Saquon, between him and, he's basically the same price as Dalvin Cook, between him and the big dog, right? He's closed that gap so much, and it's like, if I'm going to spend that, just give me Christian McCaffrey. You know what I mean? Give me Derrick Henry against the Texans, Saquon probably. Give me those guys, I think. I think that's the hardest part with Pollard for me, not just like, I am one of those Pollard truthers, so it's not that hard to talk me into him. But I think the problem is just the positional thing. Whereas wide receiver, of course, we like Justin Jefferson, et cetera. But I don't know that receiver is that strong, right? When half your games are out in the winter wonderland, there's not that many awesome wide receivers to target. So I actually feel like wide receiver is where we can get a little funky. And I think I'm glad you brought up Goddard. I like to, when we talk with Matt a lot, he always wants to see a week before we get back from an injury. I think Dario outlined on Jamar Chase, the first week Jamar Chase was back, that I think we can be smart about how we do it and not just, use that rule every single time when the guy is telling us he's 100%, when the team is telling us he's 100%. Goddard could have come back last week, technically. And they held him out for another week, I would assume, to make sure that he's actually fully healthy. I think Goddard might almost be, probably other than Miles Sanders, be my favorite Eagles way to play this. But we got a couple more games to hit on. Is there anything else in this one that we've missed? Gallup, anything like that?
Yeah, I'll add this. It looks like, Dallas Goedert was actually officially activated, and then turns out in Gardner Minshew's one start last year, Dallas Goedert had 6 catches for 105 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, I think this is a case where you probably you don't need to apply that rule of waiting a week to see what he's going to give you, because we know that he's explosive. And I think that the biggest reason they didn't activate him last week was because they were like, dude, we're playing the Bears. Like, don't re-injure yourself in this game that we've already gotten the bag.
Yes, exactly. So let's hit. So this next grouping of games, I would say we definitely have one we want to touch on here at the end of our list, and then maybe a couple others that we can just like sprinkle in a quick note or two about, because they either have weather, or whatever. But Bengals and Patriots is this weird game where I could both see this having like tons of fantasy goodness, right? Obviously there's Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Joe Burrow and everything on one side, Joe Mixon. We did get word that Hayden Hurst got downgraded to out today, so no Hayden Hurst back yet this week. And on the Patriots side, it's not so much that I'm really excited for any of these guys in this matchup, but like everybody is cheap, I guess, outside of Ramondre. Everybody is cheap. There's appealing run backs to Burrow stacks. There's some of that salary filler like we were talking about with the Isaiah Hodgins and stuff of the world. You can also get some of those guys with the Patriots. So it's a weird game where I'm not like, oh my God, I can't wait to GM game stacks of this, but there are still a lot of appealing plays. Chase, what's your kind of favorite thing to look to in this Bengals Patriots game?
So this is where it gets like a little like weird for me, right? Because like Jamar Chase is averaging like 11 targets per game at this point. He's just getting peppered with targets like constantly. And the bigger thing is like, what does targets look like when he's in man coverage or when the defense plays man? I think he sees like zone coverage, like he sees like 23% target share. When he sees man coverage, he gets like 34%, if I remember correctly, target share. Joe Burrow just likes to feed him over and over and over again because he's such a phenomenal athlete. He's like, "Oh, you guys are going to play man? Let's go do this. Let's play some ball." And he just feeds him over and over again.
Rodgers and Devontae, when he sees press man on the outside, it's just like what Rodgers used to do with Devontae. They just look at each other like, "Yeah, you're getting the ball, and there's nothing the defense can do to stop you." That's what it's like with these two.
But I mean, the Patriots have actually been really good up against the primary receivers, right? That's where I'm kind of like, do I really want to go this route? Because they have been shutting the receivers down. We know the Patriots will take one person away on the whole team, and that one person will not get, more than a handful of targets. They're not going to get more than a handful of receptions because that defense is locked in on that dude. And I'm a little bit nervous that it could be Jamar Chase this week. I think that Jamar Chase will see the targets, but will it actually amount to any kind of high level of efficiency? And I don't think that's the case. I think they're going to let Joe Mixon run. I think that they're going to let T. Higgins play one-on-one coverage on the outside. I think they're going to let Tyler Boyd see one-on-one coverage. And so for that reason, like if I decide to attack this game, and I haven't made a full decision yet, like if I'm going to go hard at this game or not, because it could end up being a high scoring game. It could also just be a complete, whatever, like fizzle out. I need to figure out exactly how I'm going to go about. I'm either going to play Higgins and Boyd, which means that I have to play Joe Burrow, or do I just run out like Jamar Chase with Burrow, Higgins, Jamar Chase with Boyd and Burrow, or do I just play Jamar Chase and take this as a skinny stack? So for me, I'm not going to play Higgins solo. Like I'm not going to just throw Higgins into lineup to feel good about it. I'm not going to play Boyd in a lineup to just feel good about it and just to have action in this game. And I'm not going to do that with Joe Mixon either. I don't think I'm going to have any Joe Mixon. But Jamar Chase is a guy that I can throw into other lineups if I have extra salary and I play a Gardner Minshew type stack. I can play Jamar Chase completely naked. Like, I don't want a run back. I don't want anything like that. I'll just play Jamar Chase. Now, if I do attack this game, and I want to get into it, I think that Nelson Aguilar is actually interesting here. I think that the Bengals have a great secondary, right? But Nelson Aguilar has seen like a 19%, I believe, target share over the past few weeks. He's getting targets. The issue is he's not catching anything. He has like a 40% like catch rate. This is a weird conundrum for me, right? Because I like to take players that are lower down, like these gross players, and I like to see their efficiency extrapolated, essentially, like if they were going to get looks or if they were going to face a bad defense or this. This is a Jacob thing where Jacob will actually go in and he'll talk about, oh, he's seen the air yards, he's seen this, he's seen that. This is not typically where I go, but I could see a way that it actually happens. So if I think this game is going to be high scoring, you obviously have to play Ramondre Stevenson if he plays, right? Because you're going to have to see breakaway runs. You're going to have to see the offense generated somehow. And it's not going to go through Mac Jones. Mac Jones isn't going to go out there and throw for 4 touchdowns and have, Jacoby Myers score 25 fantasy points, Nelson Aguilar score 20 points. But if you think this can be a shootout, I think you do have to play one wide receiver from this offense. And I think that Nelson Aguilar is a sneaky way to get leverage on this game because I don't think anybody's going to be playing him. And I think that he's a guy that could, if he gets lucky, if these targets are actually accurate and he can actually catch a freaking ball, that we've seen Nelson Aguilar in the past with the Raiders give us week performances that win us the entire contest and break the slate, especially towards the end of the season when the playoffs are on the line. It's a weird thing that he just turns on and all of a sudden he's good, right? We saw it with the Eagles. We saw it with the Raiders. Let's see if it happens with the Patriots. So I want to play Ramondre Stevenson if he plays. If he doesn't, I'll try to pivot around and figure out exactly what running back I want to play because if this isn't the case, then I'm probably going to fade this game because there's no way that the Bengals are going to be putting Jamar Chase and T. Higgins at risk if they're up by 2 or 3 touchdowns with the playoffs, coming in here shortly.
For sure. Anytime somebody mentions anything about Nelson Aguilar not being able to catch, I cannot get that video clip of the guy that was like catching babies or whatever. And whatever, I forget exactly what the verbiage is, but it just cracks me up every single time.
So I think he was like, oh, I was catching him unlike Aguilar or something like that.
Yeah.
So good. So good. And so just absolutely perfect that you're like, well, Aguilar's getting all this volume. Everything looks great, except he can't catch the ball. I was like, no, Nelson Aguilar, no chance. The anti Isaiah Hodgins. You're like literally your breakdown of Isaiah Hodgins was spot on. Catches everything, does his job, and this guy. Thank you so. This guy gets me. Oh man, that got me pretty good. The Christmas giggles going on over here, but I do think that the Patriots receivers are interesting. It's kind of a similar situation, except these guys, I don't know if they're better, probably better talent than the Giants guys. A little bit more unclear opportunity, I think I would say, with I guess it looks like Jacoby Myers is going to be back. But then, I like all 4 of these guys from a talent perspective. I don't think Kendrick Bourne's really going to get to be playable. I'm not sure that Tyquan is either, but there's lots of opportunity here. And if the Bengals do push them, right, so you make that team like you just mentioned, I play Jamar Chase or whatever. I do think I want to use one of these guys as a bring back, or Ramondre, like you said, or I could talk myself into a Hunter Henry or something like that as well. But I think that the Patriots make for this again, like kind of skinny stacks or just natural bring backs that give you the salary again, right? Isaiah Hodgins and Richie James and those guys work so well. Daniel Bellinger works so well because they have opportunity and upside at their cost. But then when you stack them up with this game scenario that you're playing out in your lineup, it just everything fits together really well. So I don't have a lot to really say super positively about the Patriots, except for like they're good chess pieces in tournament lineups. I think, Dario, anything we missed on Patriots Bengals?
I think I would add that Ramondre Stevenson may not have the backfield all to himself. It looks like Damian Harris could return this week. Things are trending in the right direction for him. So that kind of muddies things up for Ramondre a lot, in my opinion. I think there's a chance that he gets a lot less volume on the ground, but we both know that what makes Ramondre most valuable is getting those targets. And even though last week was a bit of a down week for him in that regard, I still think he's basically become the James White in New England, where he's going to be getting 6-8 targets in a game, just like it's nothing. So I think you guys are right that he's probably the most appealing piece on the Patriots side. And I think, this is actually going to be Jamar Chase's first game against Bill Belichick. So we haven't seen how Bill Belichick is going to decide to defend Jamar Chase. I think that it's a really interesting situation because the Patriots are really good in man coverage and they play man coverage at an above average rate compared to the rest of the league. So it's like, do you stick with what your defense seems to be good at and risk exposing yourself to Jamar Chase being, the best receiver in that particular scenario, one-on-one?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of just something we'll have to wait and see how Belichick decides to play it. But
I think it's another. Sorry, I was just going to say, just to add to your point on Chase, it's just another example of I want to kind of go away from what the field is kind of thinking, right? Because you just outlined, both of you have outlined that like there's a very clear path here to Jamar Chase just carving up, right? You can't just sit back and play, single man coverage against Jamar Chase. A, he's going to earn an absurd amount of volume because Joe Burrow just looks to him. And B, when he earns it, he's really efficient because, shocker, he's really goddamn good against man coverage. Now we have this narrative. It's not just a narrative. It's a thing that has happened historically with the Patriots taking away, right, someone on the opposing offense, right? They would do it to Tyreek, etc. If I were a betting man, I would say Bill's like, I'll let that Tyler Boyd fella beat me, not Jamar Chase, right?
Yeah.
But that's what everybody's probably going to think, right? When everybody's going to go spend their money on this DFS slate, it's like I can play Justin Jefferson or AJ Brown or CeeDee Lamb or whatever. Bill doubles guys. Bill's going to take Jamar Chase. If everybody assumes that, it's like you dabbling on him in tournaments makes a lot more sense, I think. Like, I don't think his own, you were talking about guys whose ownership, right? Juju's ownership might get a little higher, Kelsey's or whatever. If anything, I think the Chase number goes down from this 10%.
Chase at 10% just feels like
you have to play some.
Did we forget that he's Jamar Chase?
Yeah. I don't care what the matchup is. I don't care about anything. When Jamar Chase is 10% or sub 10%, I just think you have to have a little bit of them.
It's like when nobody wanted to play Devontae Adams anymore near the middle of this season, and then he went on
that was awesome,
insanely historic run.
He had 30 fantasy points in the first half of that game, and everybody was like, "Oh, it's over. The Raiders stink. It's just Josh Jacobs or whatever." I know we'll move on from this game. We wanted to touch really quickly on the Bills game. I actually wanted to touch really quickly on that Vegas and Steelers game. The weather is that yellow,
that's
orange.
The Saturday night game. I didn't think that was on the
Saturday night.
Late.
I would have ran with that one. I love that matchup. I'm gonna be playing a lot of captains or single game plays in that one.
Ignore me. I had the wrong injury or not injury weather report up here, so ignore me. But if you're playing that slate, I actually really like that game. I love Deontay Johnson. We got to see if Deontay Johnson's playing, but pretty fun game for tournaments. We wanted to talk about the Bills. I don't even know what to say about this game. It's a situation where the Bills are playing the Bears in Chicago. The weather is absolutely horrendous. I live down by St. Louis, and they have it like much worse than we do down here. And like I can't even step foot outside my house. Now, I'm not a big, strong, tough NFL football player, but the wind is absurd and it's miserable outside. And so I just can't fathom a situation in which I see either team throwing a bunch and having like crazy success through the air. But also, we kind of thought this about a Bills game not that long ago, a week ago, where everybody said, oh my God, this weather, all this snow, nobody's going to pass or whatever. And there was like 60 total points in the Bills and Dolphins game. Not saying I'm projecting that, but I think we should at least discuss Josh Allen, Diggs, Gabe Davis, or maybe Singletary or, Dawson Knox. Something about the Bills could pop off here if the weather is not quite as bad as we think. What do you think about this one, Dario?
I think Dawson Knox has really drawn my attention. The last couple of weeks, he's been getting pretty solid target shares, has a touchdown each of the last 2 weeks. He's kind of supplanting Gabe Davis as Josh Allen's preferred secondary target, at least these last couple of weeks, it seems. So I think that I think he's 4,300 this week. I think you definitely got to be playing some Dawson Knox if you're going to be targeting Josh Allen and if you're going to be targeting this game. And I think the weather only feeds into that narrative even more because who's going to, how deep are the targets going to be if there's 30, 40, 50 mile an hour winds? It's not going to be 50-yard bombs to Gabe Davis. It's going to be, 8 to 12-yard throws underneath, more likely to be toward Dawson Knox. Only 4,100 on DraftKings. So I think he's definitely the biggest kind of standout in my eyes.
I know that you're, definitely in on the terribleness of this weather. any Devin Singletary or running, a sprinkle of James Cook or anything, right? If we're expecting tons of runs, I mean, theoretically, you could say the Bears are going to load the box, but like, I'm not sure that even in the bad weather that they're going to load the box against Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, which means somebody in the run game against this horrendous Bears defense is probably going to have some success despite the bad weather.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you there that there's going to be some appeal for Singletary and for Cook. I think that Singletary is kind of like, we thought he was being phased out. There was that week where James Cook had like one more carry and slightly more snaps, and then it kind of reverted back to, like, especially last week in a tight game against a tough team where they really had to win it. They just said, hey, we trust Devin Singletary, and they left him out there and he got the usage. I don't think he found the end zone last week, but I think he's kind of like the Jerick McKinnon to the Bills, that where Isaiah Pacheco is the James Cook, where it's like, depending on how far ahead we are and the game script, we'll see how much we trust the rookie. But then the other guy is the one that they kind of feel more comfortable leaning on, and who is also has a chance of getting those 2 touchdown games.
Great. That's a really good comparison. Obviously, McKinnon has flashed seemingly a little bit more upside, and I guess probably a little more upside. But if you remember last year, Devin Singletary down the stretch was a fantasy monster. He was absolutely dominating for the Bills. And so I know the weather's not ideal, but that's what keeps sticking out to me, is like, this game feels like that, where it's like down the stretch, they were just like, screw it, Singletary, go, we're going to give you 20 touches here, go grind us out a win. Because Josh Allen's also dealing with an elbow injury. It's like, why would you expose in these elements in a game you're probably going to win against a crappy team, Josh Allen to more hits, and we say that all the time, and the NFL teams don't give a shit, and Josh Allen, is still getting goal line carries. But I just think it's a potential situation where we don't have a lot of cheap running backs, and we have ones on the best offense in the NFL against the Bears. So that's appealing. Chase, what did we miss on this game? What are you liking?
So I actually do like this game to an extent, because I don't think anybody's going to play it, right? So like, you'll see 1% ownership on all these guys. And Josh Allen, I don't know if you guys remember last year, I ended up winning a ton of money on this one because I took the under on everything before they started showing videos all over the place of the weather from the snowstorm against the Patriots. It was pretty, like, just bizarre how insane it was. They were dealing with 35-mile-an-hour winds with gusts up to 15. There was 10 feet of snow or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And Josh Allen still, I mean, it wasn't a great game, right? It was like 150 yards or something like that, 15 completions on 30 attempts. But Josh Allen actually throws the ball differently. He has a different method for throwing when it's cold out, that allows him to kind of have more control over the ball, which I don't think that necessarily it's like, oh, well, Josh Allen can get you 300 yards or anything like that. I just think that we could still see volume over there in the passing game, and that might not be as close to the line of scrimmage as what we think. I mean, Gabriel Davis, I think, had 2 receptions for 40 yards and a touchdown in that snowstorm game. Josh Allen ended up having 6 rushing attempts, I think, for 40 yards. So it wasn't a great game overall, but up against the Bears, who are just terrible on pretty much every front, whether it's up against the running backs, up against the wide receivers. I mean, if we see a game where Justin Fields can actually scramble and get you some yards, I think that we might be able to find some fantasy options on the other side of the ball that could be relevant, such as you guys brought up, Devin Singletary, possibly Dawson Knox. I hate putting my money on Dawson Knox because he's so touchdown dependent. But possibly Dawson Knox. I like some James Cook this week if we decide to keep it close to the line of scrimmage. Maybe he'll see some receptions. I know that the Bears play a little bit more zone, but they do play some man. They might switch it up to man if they end up having to put a spy on Josh Allen. So we could see Isaiah McKenzie possibly get some work. I mean, that's a gross one. I don't want to go Isaiah McKenzie, but his run is done. His run finished last week. But
R.I.P. Yep.
Yeah. So I want to play some Fields in this. I want to play some Singletary in this. Montgomery is gross, but I could see Montgomery, Cole Kmet possibly getting some work. This is something where I'll play 5% of my lineups just to say Hail Mary. I'm like, dude, okay. I want to play Justin Fields in this freezing cold weather because he's not going to be able to throw. Nobody else is going to be able to run. We're going to see him put up 150 rushing yards with 2 touchdowns. And guess what? That gets you there. That gets you, to where you want to be in most cases. So I'll take that. And I'll run it back with some of these options in the receiving game, or one option in the receiving game. Give me a skinny stack.
I think I would, just to close this one. Now, I will preface this by saying I didn't play KJ Osborne on this slate, so it's not like I won all the money. But in this somewhat similar situation, last week it was a 3-game Saturday slate for anyone that didn't play. This Bills Dolphins game. So the total originally opened at like 47.5 or something like that. They took the total off the board once they saw the weather, and the books were probably getting hammered on the under. They reposted at 42. And everybody's like, oh my God, they're going to get 6 feet of snow. There's wind. This game's going to be terrible for fantasy. And then just like as the game got closer and closer to kickoff, right, they cleared the field of the snow. It really wasn't that bad. There wasn't actually even any precipitation during the game. It was a little windy, but not that bad. And we get 60 points. And the rain and everything holds off till the very, very end of the game. I'm not a weatherman. I trust Kevin Roth. Go look at his weather reports. That's better than I can do. But I'm saying there's always variance in this stuff. Yeah. Kevin would tell you that himself. He would say, look, sometimes the wind just kind of dies a little bit right? Maybe the rain stops for 2 hours and the wind's only like 20 miles an hour. And we all look at it like we didn't play any 1% own Bills in this game. Like, what the hell were you doing, against the Bears? And exactly. So I'm not saying go all in. I like what Chase said. Set, if you play 150, set a few lineups aside and be like, maybe the weather's actually okay here. Because if it is, there's not that many games to target on this slate. Nobody's going to have them. And you're only competing with like Chiefs and Eagles and Cowboys. It's like, that's the dream. That's what you want to happen in DFS. So
I do want to add one more thing in real quick. The Bears haven't been involved in a game that hit under 40.5 in 8 straight games. The Bills all season have only been involved in 4 games that hit under 40.5. So if it's clean, if it's not like all nasty, like, we're expecting to be, but I mean, I'm looking at it saying mostly cloudy, low chance of precipitation on the weather report that I'm looking at. Like, they're not going to hit below 40.5. There's going to be touchdowns to be had. And a lot of that is going to come from Justin Fields. So like, I will never fade Justin Fields in DFS. I won't do it. I think it's DFS suicide.
And just another thing on that and all of these games as we start to close, we have a lot of assumptions about the weather right now, but things do change, right? Make sure you go back and check. We have an NFL weather page on RotoGrinders, or, if you think you're your own meteorologist, do your thing. But I'd be checking these. I would be checking it like all the way leading up close to kickoff, because the best tournament plays, like, I don't know, Josh Allen to Gabe and Diggs, whatever, could end up actually being the best tournament plays if the weather clears up and no one goes back to him. They could be the worst.
AJ Brown and Devontae Smith did to the Bears last week.
Yeah, I mean, my God, Jalen Hurts played the worst game of his season, and everybody scored 30 fantasy. All those guys went absolutely nuts. So just monitor that weather. That's really that's the whole point around that game and all of the games. What we always do before we get out of here is we kind of go down the row and pick out our one conviction tournament call for this week. And since Chase is the guest, our honored guest, you get to go first, and then I'll just steal something that you said at the end. But what is the one thing that people need to have in their tournament lineups? It can be an individual player. It can be like a specific stack. But what's the one thing that you're centering your tournament play around this week?
Oh, man. Okay, this is a little bit of a twist. I wasn't expecting this. I thought, we were going to give Alakis like a player. I think this week it's important to have variance across your lineups, because if one of these games like the Chiefs Seahawks one ends up completely dissipating, then it could be any one of these games that actually performs and gives you that high scoring total that you want. I mean, like, I think that you have to have variance, but in terms of like a player that I want to surround myself with, it's going to be J.K. Dobbins. They have Tyler Huntley playing at quarterback. Like, this is going to give him an excellent opportunity to see breakaway runs, to be heavily involved in the offense. And Tyler Huntley, to an extent, does dump it down the running back. So maybe we see some receptions as well. The bigger factor is the Falcons have allowed at least 100 yards rushing to the running back position in 5 of the past 7 games. And if we start to see turnovers from Desmond Ridder with short field positions, I wouldn't doubt J.K. Dobbins coming away with like 3 touchdowns this week.
Love it. I love it. I am biased because I have J.K. Dobbins tagged in Lineup HQ as one of my conviction plays of the week, so I will take anyone agreeing with me, whether you and I are right or wrong. But I love J.K. Dobbins this week. 100% agree. Dario, what you got?
Yeah, I think for me, it's looking like Juju Smith-Schuster is the way to go.
I should have went first.
we highlighted him when we were talking about this game, and I just think he's had a very significant role with Patrick Mahomes, and for whatever reason, he's been under the radar since he came back from his injury. He hasn't had that crazy huge game yet, but this game is probably our favorite one on the slate, and I think he's my favorite weapon in our favorite game. So, by extension, play some Juju this week.
Love it. Love Juju. We're all team Juju here, apparently, this week. And, Matt's not here, so somebody's got to pick up the Khalif Raymond of the week. And I'm going to go with the Brandon's guy, the Olympic sprinter, Marquise Goodwin. Isaiah Hodgins can be the ESB of the week. He can be the secondary punt, gross punt of the week. But Marquise Goodwin on the other side of that Juju play, I just think for such a cheap price with the elevated role for Tyler Lockett, understand small concerns here and there from his injuries and whatnot, but you just get massive upside. I mean, the role he's been starting to carve out has been nice even when Tyler Lockett's been in, and now he's competing with a banged up Noah Fant, Will Dissly, and Laquan Treadwell. They can't throw it to DK Metcalf on every single play, and the Chiefs probably have an idea that they're going to throw it to DK Metcalf a little bit. So I just think everything is lining up for a super cheap Marquise. Pair him with Juju, play Mahomes, Geno, whatever. Get your J.K. Dobbins in that running back spot, which is really high upside play, but also really not expensive. He's $5,800 on DraftKings, and then we got you a shell of a lineup here to start. You can do a lot of fun things with a J.K. Dobbins, Juju, Marquise Goodwin start to your teams. So that's going to get us out of here. We will, of course, be back. I assume Matt will be back unless he's taking another long, trip to go change his tires or whatever the hell he does every Friday. But we'll be back in week 17. So we'll see you guys. The season's closing out. Good luck in your season-long leagues, of course. Good luck in your best ball semifinals, and good luck on the Week 16 DFS slate. We'll see you guys next week.